Think you've seen every WWII movie worth watching? Your algorithm's been lying to you. While everyone's rewatching Saving Private Ryan, there's a graveyard of public domain masterpieces collecting digital dust. These aren't your grandfather's propaganda reels. These are the films that shaped everything you think you know about war cinema. Ready to stop scrolling and start discovering? The story of G.I. Joe. 1945. General Eisenhower called this the greatest war film ever made, and Hollywood pretended not to hear him. This isn't your typical heroic war flick. Director William Wellman embedded war correspondent Ernie Pyle into every frame, following an infantry unit through Italy's mud and misery. Robert Mitchum earned his only Oscar nomination playing a captain who looks like he's aged a decade in 6 months. The film features actual combat veterans playing themselves, men who just returned from the European theater. Many would die months later on Okinawa, never seeing the movie they appeared in. What's revolutionary here is the absence of glory. No John Wayne bravado, no patriotic speeches, just exhausted men dragging themselves through rain and ruins. The Battle of Monte Cassino sequence remains one of the grittiest depictions of infantry warfare ever captured. Critics praised its unflinching realism, while audiences watched soldiers deal with cold feet, homesickness, and the terror of never making it home. Pyle himself died covering the Pacific before the premiere, making this his cinematic eulogy. The film bombed commercially because Americans wanted heroes, not haunted men covered in filth. Today, it stands as proof that the best war films are made by people who understand war isn't cinematic. Sahara, 1943. Humphrey Bogart commands a tank nicknamed Lulu Bell through the Libyan desert and somehow makes dehydration look like film noir. This isn't just another desert warfare movie. It's a pressure cooker where water becomes more valuable than ammunition and Allied unity gets tested in 120-degree heat. Bogart's Sergeant Joe Gunn picks up stragglers from across the Allied forces, creating a microcosm of WWII cooperation. The cast includes soldiers from Britain, South Africa, France, Sudan, and even a captured Italian, all converging on a dried-up well. What makes Sahara brilliant is its refusal to sugarcoat anything. Director Zoltan Korda shot in California's Imperial Valley, 235 feet below sea level, where temperatures hit the 90s even in winter. The cast genuinely suffered for authenticity. The film's climax involves German forces desperate enough for water to trade food, then attack when negotiations fail. Bogey's performance feels stripped down and honest, far from his Casablanca smoothness. Critics loved how the film minimized wartime propaganda while maximizing tension. The cinematography by Rudolph Maté earned an Oscar nomination for capturing the desert's. There's a darkly comic moment about water-cooled machine guns when everyone's dying of thirst that somehow works. Released months after Casablanca, 5 Graves to Cairo, 1943. Billy Wilder made this espionage thriller while the war was still raging, and it shows. A British soldier impersonates a dead waiter in Rommel's headquarters hotel. That premise alone is bonkers, but Wilder pulls it off with trademark wit and darkness. Erich von Stroheim plays Rommel with such chilling precision that the performance renewed his career after years in obscurity. The film's title refers to secret supply dumps hidden across Egypt disguised as archaeological sites. Franchot Tone plays the soldier fumbling through his deception, while Anne Baxter's cynical French maid adds layers of moral complexity. What's fascinating is the film's release timing. Audiences watched a dramatization of battles that had just concluded months earlier. Wilder and Charles Brackett crafted a script that humanizes Rommel without glorifying him, a risky move in wartime Hollywood. Critics praised its intelligence and suspense despite obvious propaganda elements. The film inspired real military deception operations, including Operation Copperhead, where the British used a Montgomery look-alike to confuse German intelligence before D-Day. Wilder shot exterior battle sequences at Camp Young with actual Army cooperation, blending newsreel footage seamlessly. Von Stroheim's first day on set became Hollywood legend when he told Wilder he wasn't 10 years ahead of his time. The film's twist ending delivers poetic justice without feeling contrived. Modern viewers appreciate its refusal to demonize every German character while maintaining clear moral lines. Attack the Battle of New Britain, 1944. This military documentary doesn't mess around with Hollywood gloss. It's raw footage of the New Britain campaign, part of the brutal New Guinea offensive. The film follows Marines and Army units through jungle warfare that makes Vietnam look organized. What's striking is the complete absence of narrative sugarcoating. Soldiers slog through swamps, get picked off by snipers, and deal with tropical diseases Hollywood usually ignores. The Battle of New Britain was strategic hell, designed to isolate Japanese forces at Rabaul. Filmmakers embedded with combat units captured the chaos of island-hopping warfare. There's footage of landing craft hitting beaches under fire, flamethrowers clearing bunkers, and the aftermath nobody wants to photograph. Critics at the time praised its authenticity compared to sanitized studio productions. The film served dual purposes as both historical record and morale booster, showing Americans the real cost of Pacific victories. Modern historians value it for documenting fighting tactics and equipment in actual combat conditions. The narration feels typical for the era, but the visuals tell uncomfortable truths about jungle warfare's brutality. What separates this from propaganda is its willingness to show American casualties and tactical mistakes. The New Britain campaign tied down over 100,000 Japanese troops without direct assault, a strategy this film contextualizes brilliantly. It's not entertaining in the traditional sense. It's important, unflinching, go for broke, 1951. This film broke barriers by centering on the 402nd Regimental Combat Team, Japanese-American soldiers fighting for a country that imprisoned their families. Director Robert Pirosh cast actual 442nd veterans, including Henry Nakamura, lending authenticity Hollywood rarely achieved. Van Johnson plays the Texas lieutenant who initially distrusts his Nisei troops before witnessing their valor. The 402nd became the most decorated unit in U.S. military history for its size and length of service. They rescued the Lost Battalion in the Vosges, suffering 800 casualties to save 201 men. This film dramatizes that rescue along with campaigns across Italy. What's revolutionary is its refusal to downplay the racism these soldiers faced from fellow Americans while fighting Nazis. Critics praised its balance between action sequences and character development. The title comes from Hawaiian pidgin slang meaning giving everything you've got. Pirosh won an Oscar nomination for Best Story and Screenplay, recognition that Japanese-American stories deserved Hollywood treatment. The film addresses the elephant in the room. These men's families were in internment camps while they bled for democracy. Real veterans' performances add gravitas that trained actors couldn't fake. Memphis Belle, 1944, the actual B-17 bomber crew's final mission filmed as documentary warfare. Director William Wyler flew combat missions himself, manning cameras at 25,000 feet while German fighters attacked. This isn't Hollywood recreation. It's real aerial combat footage edited into coherent narrative. The Memphis Belle completed 25 missions without getting shot down, a near-impossible feat when average survival was far lower. Wyler captures the bomber crew's routine with no dramatization needed. Takeoff procedures, formation flying, flak bursts, fighter attacks, bombing runs, the return home. Everything happens with documentary precision. What's remarkable is the lack of heroic posturing. These men do their jobs knowing each mission might be their last. The film won praise for showing aerial warfare's reality without propaganda theatrics. Narrator Ed Kern's calm voice contrasts sharply with the violence on screen. You watch real bombers get hit and not return. Real crews bail out over enemy territory. Real fear in real faces. Wyler's footage influenced every WWII aviation film afterward. The 1990 Hollywood version starring Matthew Modine added fake drama this original documentary didn't need. Critics note how the real Memphis Belle crew's professionalism speaks louder than any script. There's a moment when a wounded gunner keeps firing despite injuries that defines the entire film's ethos. The plane itself became celebrity. Battle of Midway, 1942. John Ford directed this with a camera in one hand while Japanese bombs fell around him. He literally filmed the battle while under attack, getting wounded by shrapnel in the process. This 18-minute documentary captures the turning point of the Pacific War in real time. Ford was on Midway Island when the Japanese assault began on June 4, 1942. His footage shows anti-aircraft fire, dive bombers screaming overhead, explosions that shake the camera. The U.S. sank 4 Japanese carriers in a single day, shifting the war's momentum permanently. Ford's narration feels immediate because he's processing trauma while filming. You hear real fear, real exhaustion, real disbelief at survival. The film won an Oscar for Best Documentary, richly deserved for capturing history as it happened. What separates this from propaganda is its raw honesty. Ford shows American planes getting shot down, facilities burning, casualties mounting. The Japanese attacked with over 250 aircraft, expecting easy victory. American codebreakers had deciphered their plans, allowing carriers to ambush the assault force. Ford's footage contextualizes Battle of Russia 1943. Frank Capra's Why We Fight series produced this 84-minute epic documenting Nazi Germany's catastrophic Eastern Front failure. The film doesn't shy from showing the German Army's initial victories or the Soviet Union's desperate resistance. Capra compiled captured German footage, Soviet newsreels, and Hollywood effects into a comprehensive narrative. The Battle of Moscow in 1941 stopped Hitler's blitzkrieg cold, literally. German forces froze in winter uniforms inadequate for Russian temperatures. The film documents this hubris brilliantly, showing Wehrmacht confidence evaporating in sub-zero conditions. What's remarkable is the respect given to Soviet fighting spirit despite ongoing Cold War tensions brewing. Capra earned an Oscar nomination for Best Documentary. The film served multiple purposes: educating Americans about their Soviet allies, explaining the Eastern Front's strategic importance, and documenting Nazi atrocities. Critics praised its comprehensive scope and refusal to simplify complex military operations. Modern historians value the captured German footage, showing Operation Barbarossa from the invaders' perspective. The Siege of Leningrad segment remains harrowing, depicting civilian starvation and resilience. Capra doesn't glorify Stalin but acknowledges Soviet sacrifice exceeded every other nation's. 20 million Soviet dead dwarfed American casualties, a fact this film doesn't minimize. The narration reflects wartime alliance politics before post-war divisions. There's footage of destroyed villages, mass graves, and partisan warfare rarely seen in American productions. The film's climax, showing German retreat from Moscow, vindicated Soviet strategy over Nazi ideology. Battle of San Pietro. 1945. John Huston filmed this in Italy's Liri Valley, where American forces fought for weeks to capture a single town. The Army censored the original cut for being too honest about casualties and tactical failures. What remains is still devastatingly effective. San Pietro sat on the road to Rome, defended by Germans who turned every building into a fortress. Huston's cameras followed infantry attacks that failed repeatedly before succeeding through attrition. The opening shows the town before bombardment, a peaceful Italian village. Then comes the systematic destruction. Artillery pounds buildings into rubble. Infantry advances under machine gun fire. Medics treat wounded in the open. Huston doesn't look away from death. Several soldiers filmed in earlier scenes don't appear later because they died during production. That reality haunts every frame. General George Marshall initially banned the film for damaging morale, then reversed course after screening it to emphasize war's costs. Critics note Huston's willingness to show tactical confusion and officer uncertainty. Combat footage captures the grinding nature of Italian campaign warfare. San Pietro took over 2 weeks and 1,100 American casualties, one small town. The film contextualizes why progress was measured in yards, not miles. Huston's narration sounds exhausted, processing trauma while explaining military necessity. There's footage of civilian casualties and destroyed religious sites that propaganda films usually omitted. The Italian civilians returning to rubble that was their home delivers the film's emotional gut punch. The Fighting Lady, 1944. This Oscar-winning documentary follows the aircraft carrier USS Yorktown across the Pacific for months of operations. Directors Edward Steichen and others embedded with the crew, filming everything from flight deck operations to mess hall routines. The Fighting Lady captures carrier warfare's complexity and danger. Flight operations involve split-second coordination where mistakes mean death. Deck crew dodge propellers and landing aircraft while arming planes for missions. The film shows kamikaze attacks, air battles, and the aftermath of successful strikes. What's compelling is the emphasis on teamwork over individual heroism. Carrier operations require thousands of sailors working in perfect sync. One mistake cascades into catastrophe. Steichen's footage documents this ballet of controlled chaos brilliantly. Critics praise the cinematography and editing that made naval operations comprehensible to civilians. The color footage remains stunning, especially aerial combat sequences over the Pacific. The Yorktown participated in major battles, including the Marianas Turkey Shoot, where American pilots devastated Japanese naval aviation. This footage provides the best visual record of carrier operations in the Pacific theater. Modern historians study the film for technical details and tactics documented nowhere else. There's humanizing moments, too. Sailors reading letters, playing cards, dealing with homesickness between combat operations. The juxtaposition of routine and terror defines carrier life. Steichen came from photography background, bringing artistic eye to documentary format. His composition skills elevate this beyond standard military footage. The film won Best Documentary Oscar deservedly, capturing history while it happened. Public domain access means aspiring filmmakers report from the Aleutians, 1943. John Huston ventured to Alaska's Aleutian Islands, documenting the forgotten theater of Pacific warfare. Japanese forces occupied American territory here, prompting a brutal campaign in miserable conditions. Huston's cameras captured combat in freezing rain, volcanic terrain, and constant fog. The Aleutian campaign receives minimal attention compared to South Pacific battles, making this documentation vital. American forces fought in conditions that made jungle warfare look pleasant. Temperatures hovered near freezing, visibility stayed poor, and terrain consisted of volcanic rock and tundra. The film shows airmen flying bombing missions through weather that grounded most aircraft. Ground forces advanced through fog so thick they couldn't see enemies 50 feet away. Huston's narration conveys the campaign's strange isolation, fighting at the edge of the world. The Battle of Attu resulted in one of war's highest casualty rates, when Japanese garrison chose death over surrender. Footage captures the aftermath, documenting battlefield carnage Huston doesn't sanitize. Critics noted the film's effectiveness, showing forgotten fronts' importance. The Aleutians prevented Japanese attacks on West Coast and tied down forces needed elsewhere. Combat footage reveals unique challenges: equipment freezing, aircraft modifications for extreme weather, supply line difficulties. The landscape looks otherworldly, more like moon terrain than Earth. Modern viewers recognize this as among WWII's most uncomfortable campaigns. Soldiers dealt with trench foot, frostbite, and psychological strain of constant fog. Huston captures their exhaustion and determination with documentarian's eye. The film's greatest achievement is making audiences understand this neglected campaign's strategic value and human cost. Public domain ensures this theater doesn't disappear from historical memory. Let There Be Light, 1946, John Huston's suppressed masterpiece documenting shell-shocked soldiers' psychiatric treatment. The Army banned this film for 35 years, fearing it damaged recruitment. Huston filmed at Mason General Hospital, where combat veterans received care for what we now call PTSD. The footage shows men broken by war, uncontrollable shaking, blindness with no physical cause, inability to speak, catatonic states. Psychiatrists use innovative therapy techniques, including hypnosis and group counseling. Watching soldiers slowly recover proves more powerful than any combat footage. One man regains his voice after years of silence. Another's psychosomatic blindness lifts through treatment. These transformations feel miraculous and heartbreaking simultaneously. The film challenges every heroic war narrative by showing victory's invisible costs. Critics who finally saw it after declassification called it Huston's best work. The director fought the Army for decades to release this film, believing Americans deserve truth about war's psychological damage. What makes it revolutionary is the dignity given to broken men. No shame, no judgment, just documentation of healing. The soldiers' faces reveal trauma no amount of medals can erase. Modern audiences recognize this as The Negro Soldier, 1944. Frank Capra produced this groundbreaking film, highlighting Black Americans' military contributions. Hollywood had largely ignored or stereotyped black service members, making this film politically daring. The Army commissioned it to boost black morale and white acceptance of integrated combat units. Director Stuart Heisler framed the narrative through a black church service where a minister chronicles African-American military history. The film documents black soldiers' service from Revolutionary War through WWII, then transitions to WWII contributions. Training sequences show black units preparing for combat with same intensity as white units. The film doesn't shy from racism, but contextualizes military service as pathway to equality. What's remarkable is the production quality matching any A-list Hollywood film. Capra ensured this looked prestigious, not like throwaway propaganda. Critics praised its dignity and historical thoroughness. The Negro Soldier challenged prevailing narratives about black military capability and patriotism. Combat footage shows black units in action, contradicting stereotypes about courage under fire. The Tuskegee Airmen receive prominent coverage, celebrating their exemplary record. Modern historians note the film's limitations. It downplays segregation's brutality and oversells military integration progress. But for 1944 America, this represented revolutionary filmmaking. Black audiences packed theaters to see their service acknowledged. White audiences couldn't easily dismiss contributions documented so thoroughly. The film influenced post-war civil rights movements by establishing black military excellence as indisputable fact. Public domain means researchers analyze it as both progressive breakthrough and revealing period piece. Watching now reveals how far representation has come and how familiar some arguments remain. This film opened doors by making black service undeniable. With the Marines at Tarawa, 1944, this 18-minute documentary won an Oscar for capturing the Pacific War's brutal reality. Tarawa's assault lasted 76 hours and killed over 1,000 Marines. Combat cameramen filmed the entire battle, several dying in the process. The footage is uncompromising and shocking even today. Marines land on beaches under withering fire. Bodies float in the surf. Wounded drag themselves toward cover. Flamethrowers clear bunkers at close range. The Japanese garrison fought to near annihilation, surrendering only when further resistance became physically impossible. Director Lewis Hayward compiled footage that made American audiences understand the Pacific War's cost. The tides miscalculated, leaving landing craft stuck on reefs hundreds of yards from shore. Marines waded through chest-deep water while machine guns cut them down. This tactical disaster is documented without sugarcoating. The film shows correspondent Robert Sherrod, who covered the battle and wrote the definitive account. His narration carries the weight of witnessed trauma. Modern Marines study Tarawa for lessons about amphibious assault planning and the importance of detailed reconnaissance. The battle proved that even tiny islands could be fortified into nearly impregnable fortresses. Combat footage influenced how Americans viewed the Pacific War, understanding it would be won island by island at terrible cost. Critics praised the film's honesty despite its disturbing. The footage of dead Marines shocked a home front accustomed to sanitized war news. Public domain means military historians and educators freely access this unfiltered documentation of amphibious warfare's reality. The Battle of China, 1944. Frank Capra's Why We Fight installment documenting Japan's invasion of China and Chinese resistance. The film provides crucial context for the Pacific War by showing its Asian origins. Japanese aggression in China beginning in 1931 predated Pearl Harbor by a decade. The documentary compiles footage from Chinese and Japanese sources showing the conflict's scale. The Rape of Nanking received shocking documentation, capturing Japanese atrocities that killed hundreds of thousands of civilians. Chinese resistance, despite overwhelming Japanese military superiority, receives respectful treatment. Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist forces and communist guerrillas both appear fighting the common enemy. What's remarkable is the film's acknowledgment of China's immense suffering and strategic importance. American audiences learned their Pacific ally had been fighting longer and harder than any allied nation. The Flying Tigers Volunteer Squadron receives coverage showing Americans who fought for China before Pearl Harbor. Critics noted the film's effectiveness, explaining the Pacific War's Asian dimension beyond American-Japanese conflict. Combat footage shows battles across China's vast territory, from urban warfare to mountain fighting. The film contextualizes how Japanese occupation tied down millions of troops who might otherwise fight in the Pacific. Modern historians value the compiled Chinese footage, otherwise difficult to access. The documentary doesn't shy from showing Japanese brutality toward civilians, preparing audiences for Pacific War's ruthless nature. Post-war Cold War politics made this film awkward as communist victory complicated nationalist narratives. Public domain status means the footage remains accessible despite political complications. Desert Victory, 1943. British documentary capturing the North Africa campaign from El Alamein through Tunisia. The film won an Oscar and Churchill personally approved it for propaganda purposes. Directors Roy Bolting and others compiled footage from British combat cameramen following Montgomery's Eighth Army. The documentary opens with Axis forces at Egypt's doorstep, threatening the Suez Canal. Then comes El Alamein, the defensive victory that stopped Rommel's advance. Montgomery's methodical offensive preparations received detailed coverage. The massive artillery barrage opening the battle gets documented in powerful sequences. British forces break through German lines, beginning the long pursuit westward. Tank battles across open desert showcase armored warfare at its most fluid. The film doesn't hide casualties or tactical setbacks. What emerges is respect for Rommel's defensive skills, despite ultimate defeat. The coordination between RAF and ground forces receives emphasis, showing close air support evolution. American participation gets acknowledged as Allied cooperation becomes crucial. The victory at El Alamein marked a turning point Churchill famously described as the beginning of the end. Combat footage captures the scale of mechanized desert warfare, thousands of vehicles moving across barren landscapes. Modern viewers appreciate the authentic documentation before Hollywood recreations. The film influenced British national identity and morale during the war's darkest moments. Critics praised its comprehensive narrative and excellent cinematography. Public domain access means military historians study authentic desert warfare tactics and equipment. The footage shows a different warfare style than European or Pacific theaters, emphasizing mobility and logistics over terrain control. To the Shores of Iwo Jima, 1945. This documentary chronicles one of WWII's most iconic battles through combat cameraman footage. The assault on Iwo Jima lasted 36 days and killed nearly 7,000 Marines. The island's strategic value as airbase for bombing Japan justified the horrific cost. The film opens showing the volcanic island's ominous appearance, Mount Suribachi dominating the landscape. Japanese defenders created a fortress with tunnels, bunkers, and hidden positions. The amphibious assault footage remains among war's most dramatic visual records. Landing craft hit black sand beaches while artillery and mortars rain down. Marines advance across open ground with no cover, taking devastating casualties. The flag raising on Suribachi gets filmed, though the iconic photograph comes later. Combat cameramen captured the grinding battle for every yard of volcanic rock. Flamethrowers, demolitions, and close quarters fighting characterize the footage. The film doesn't romanticize the battle or minimize Japanese defensive effectiveness. What emerges is respect for both sides' fighting determination. Modern Marines study Iwo Jima as ultimate test of amphibious assault doctrine. The battle proved that even overwhelming firepower couldn't dislodge determined defenders without infantry sacrifice. Critics noted the footage's unflinching documentation of warfare's brutality. Combat photographers and cameramen suffered high casualty rates capturing this battle. Their work ensures Iwo Jima's memory persists beyond medals and monuments. Public domain means this visual record remains freely accessible for education and remembrance. The True Glory, 1945. British and American collaboration documenting D-Day through Germany's surrender. Directors Garson Kanin and Carol Reed compiled footage from Allied combat cameramen. The film covers Operation Overlord's planning, execution, and the long campaign across Western Europe. Narration comes from actual soldiers describing their experiences, lending authenticity Hollywood couldn't match. The D-Day sequences remain powerful despite decades of cinematic recreations. Landing craft approach Normandy beaches at dawn, chaos erupting as doors drop. Infantry wade through obstacles under machine gun fire, while engineers clear mines. Paratroopers drop into darkness behind enemy lines, many scattered far from objectives. The film documents both triumph and tragedy of the invasion. Beyond D-Day comes the grinding advance through hedgerow country. Combat footage shows the claustrophobic nature of Norman bocage fighting, where every field was a fortress. The breakout from Normandy, liberation of Paris, Market Garden's failure, and Battle of the Bulge receive comprehensive coverage. What separates this from typical documentaries is the soldier narration technique. Hearing participants describe their experiences while watching footage creates powerful immediacy. The film won Best Documentary Oscar deservedly, setting standards for compilation documentaries. Critics praised its scope and emotional impact. Modern viewers recognize this as foundational template for multi-part war documentaries. Public domain ensures this comprehensive visual record remains accessible for studying European campaign from invasion through victory. The footage captures liberation of concentration camps, confronting audiences with Holocaust evidence. Combat America 1943. Clark Gable narrated this documentary after joining the Army Air Forces. The Hollywood star flew combat missions as aerial gunner, documenting B-17 bomber operations. Gable's celebrity brought unprecedented attention to 8th Air Force crews. The film follows bomber groups training in the United States, then deploying to England. Training sequences show the intense preparation required for high-altitude precision bombing. Crews drill on gunnery, formation flying, emergency procedures, and navigation. The transition to England and combat missions feels sudden, mirroring the crew's experience. Combat footage shows daylight bombing raids over Germany and occupied Europe. B-17s fly in tight formations for mutual defense against fighter attacks. The fighter escort's absence early in the war left bombers vulnerable. Footage captures German fighters attacking from multiple angles while flak fills the sky. Damaged bombers struggle to maintain formation or limp home alone. Gable's participation added credibility and risk. He nearly died when his plane took heavy damage over Germany. The film balances action with personal stories, showing crews dealing with stress between missions. Modern audiences appreciate the authentic documentation before CGI recreations. The casualty rates for bomber crews exceeded those of most infantry units. 1 in 4 airmen died during the war, a statistic this film contextualizes through human faces. Critics praised Gable's commitment to serving despite exemption opportunities. His presence legitimized documentary filmmaking as frontline work, not rear-echelon publicity. Combat footage influenced post-war aviation films, establishing visual language for aerial warfare. Public domain access means aviation enthusiasts study authentic B-17 operations and tactics. The World at War series, episodes. This British documentary series from the 70s compiled comprehensive bibliotism coverage using newly released archival footage. Producer Jerome Kay assembled footage from over 30 archives across multiple nations. The 26-episode series covers every theater and aspect of the war in unprecedented detail. Laurence Olivier's narration provides gravitas while avoiding melodrama. Each episode focuses on specific campaigns, battles, or themes with expert historical analysis. What makes this series revolutionary is the access to previously classified Soviet footage. Eastern Front episodes document the war's most brutal theater with unflinching honesty. The Holocaust receives dedicated coverage using survivor testimony and liberation footage. Modern historians consider this the definitive WWII visual documentary, despite being decades old. The series influenced countless subsequent documentaries and established standards for compilation filmmaking. Combat footage from all major belligerents provides balanced perspective rare in wartime productions. The interviews with participants from all sides add human dimension to strategic narratives. Critics universally praised its comprehensiveness and refusal to simplify complex events. The production took 4 years and interviewed over 200 subjects. Several interviewees died before broadcast, making their testimony historically irreplaceable. Public domain elements and fair use allow educators to utilize segments for teaching. The series contextualizes how total war transforms societies and individuals permanently. Strategic bombing debates, partisan warfare ethics, and occupation policies receive nuanced treatment. Watching the complete series provides education equivalent to semester-long university courses.